Hej och välkomna hit. Nu ska vi få en inblick i hur det är att vara visselblåsare. En av de mest berömda är Edward Snowden. Han kan inte längre vara i sitt eget hemland i USA utan har fått asyl eller han har fått uppehållstillstånd i Ryssland. Det var väldigt många som sa nej till att han skulle få vara i deras länder. Igår så tilldelades han det alternativa Nobelpriset Right Livelihood-priset som alltså är ett fint pris för bland annat civil olydnad. Han kunde själv inte närvara när priset delades ut i riksdagen, men han lät så här på en Skype-länk.
This award recognizes the work of so many, not just over recent years, but over decades, who recognize that human rights is a new name for an old concept, the concept of liberty. And the price of fighting for liberty in changing times, in times of fear, in times of novel dangers, new threats, is unpredictable and often quite high.
Strax innan hans far, Lonnie Snowden, skulle ta emot priset så var han här hos mig i studion och jag bad honom beskriva sin son. Men först en tillbakablick på vad egentligen Edward Snowden har gjort.
If you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded.
Edward Snowden lämnade allt bakom sig för att kunna läcka topphemliga dokument om USAs massövervakning. Men vem är han och varför gjorde han det? När journalister senare har kartlagt hans liv är det knappt någon av hans gamla lärare som minns honom. De få som minns säger att han mest ägnade sig åt datorer och rollspel. År 2006 anställdes han utan examen och formella meriter av CIA för att arbeta med IT-säkerhet. Men han var inte nöjd och förfärades när han insåg farorna med statlig övervakning. Snart bestämde han sig för att avslöja allt. Det var i början av juni 2013 som The Guardian och Washington Post avslöjade att USA avlyssnar telefon- och internettrafik och att myndigheten NSA kommer åt uppgifter i Googles och Facebooks datasystem.
This is a man who has betrayed his country, who is sitting...
Edward Snowden anklagades för spioneri av hemlandet USA och bestämde sig för att fly. Ryssland erbjöd Snowden en fristad och Putin kallade honom en oönskad julklapp. Världen över kallas han Visselblåsaren och nu får han Right Livelihood-priset, ett alternativt Nobelpris.
Welcome, Lonnie Snowden, who is Edward Snowden's father.
Thank you.
And you are here to receive the prize because your son couldn't be here.
I'm here to certainly my show of support for my son and also the Right Livelihood Foundation. I'm so thankful for their positive recognition of Ed and so many of the people who are involved with that organization and the wonderful mission that they have.
What does the prize mean to Edward Snowden, do you think?
You know, he's received so many awards that within the U.S. they really don't get reported because there's really been a tremendous effort to suppress the story by politicians, one of whom is, I believe you just had, John Kerry, and many others. I believe it's a sense of a growing vindication in terms of the public acceptance and acknowledgement of the validity of what he shared. Now, 18, 19 months since the disclosures, absolutely no one can dispute the accuracy of what he shared, the original Guardian video. Originally, many politicians questioned that. Politicians in the U.S. suggested that it was overreach, that things he was saying was not true. That stood the test of time. No one can challenge the accuracy of what he shared.
If you would describe your son with your own words, how would you say about him?
Humble, very intelligent. But I've been asked that so many times, and I think it's the easiest way is the movie that recently came out, Citizen 4. That's live tape. He wasn't acting. The Guardian video when he was in Hong Kong, that's authentic. That's Edward Snowden. So anyone who wants to know who Edward Snowden is or to have a sense of who he is and his personality is right there. As they can hear him speak, they can see him as a father. It was very distressing for me early on after the disclosures. I knew he had seen something that had to trouble him greatly because he's always very honest, very direct. As a child, never dishonest.
But what was your reaction when you heard about all this? I mean, was it like a father? Why did you do it? Or have you always been supporting him?
Yes, always. But initially, it's a matter of I prefer to be fact-driven. And initially, there was much political rhetoric. Many politicians rushed to jump in front of a camera and vilify him because their political careers, personal ambitions were threatened. We now know that there's been much overreach by agencies within our government, the U.S. government, and politicians. So certainly there was concern. I had to wait, as many people did, to get enough facts to come to a reasonable conclusion on my own. And that took probably a month to really grasp what had occurred. And it's consistent with who my son is. He saw things that troubled him greatly, and he had a choice to continue to receive money, to accept the salary, and go to work every day, look in the mirror, and know what was being done, not only to his fellow citizens, but his fellow human beings, and that it was wrong, that it was abusive, a violation of both the United States Constitution and international law.
Do you understand
and
him?
Ethics. I'm sorry?
Do you understand him, what he did?
Do
you understand why he did it?
Yes, absolutely. But it was to expose wrongdoing. And so he had two choices: to say nothing and accept money and continue to do his job, as so many within that world of work do, or to speak the truth. And what he did was he spoke the truth, and he shared the truth, and many are very angry that he exposed government wrongdoing.
What do you know about his life today? Because I presume you can communicate with him.
I communicate with him through
Skype.
attorneys, and I have the ability, if need be, to speak directly to him, much in the way that he will probably speak today. But the most important thing to me, and which I know to be the case, is that he be safe, secure, and healthy. That's as a father.
And that's what he is.
And he is, yes, yes.
And the future? He's a young man.
I certainly wish I could predict the future. I can't. What I know is that he lives with a clear conscience of knowing that he did the right thing, that no matter what happens tomorrow, is that he did what he knew to be in the best interests of his fellow human beings. And if something were to happen, he could live and die with that. And so can I. I'm proud of my son for speaking the truth, because the easy way out would have been to continue to receive the very lucrative salary and do what he was doing. And he attempted to work within the government to express his concerns. And, other people have done that. Many other Americans have been persecuted for complaining about the same programs, for trying to work inside the system, and absolutely persecuted. And he saw that happen. And he knew that what was going on was wrong, and so he shared that.
But you don't know anything about the future so far. You just have to wait and see.
Nor does anyone.
Nor does anyone. We will also I will invite Mr. Daniel Ellsberg, who got the award, the prize, 2006.
Vid utdelningen av Right Livelihood-priset i riksdagen igår fanns flera visselblåsare på plats. Mest känd är Daniel Ellsberg, den krigsanalytiker som 1971 läckte de så kallade Pentagon Papers. De dokument som avslöjade att den amerikanska regeringen systematiskt ljög om sin avsikt att avsluta Vietnamkriget. Publiceringen i New York Times bidrog till att vända den amerikanska opinionen. För denna insats belönades Daniel Ellsberg med 2006 års Right Livelihood Award.
I'm here today, I'm listening to your program as an American, but also as a son and a father. And I'm really hoping that Ed will have the chance to hear this program. I don't know how often he's had the chance to hear you speak like that, but I know it would really warm his heart marvelously to hear his father speaking that way. I know that when I met Lon for the first time in New York, I remember I wanted to thank him for the support he's been giving his son, because I know how much it meant to me to have my father support me when I was on trial. And indeed, he was speaking for me when I was eluding the FBI for 13 days, putting out the Pentagon Papers. And reporters couldn't get to me. The FBI was hunting for me. But my father spoke for me, and it was wonderful to hear his support, which I hadn't fully anticipated. He was a Republican who'd voted for Nixon twice, and Nixon was hunting me down and later actually tried to incapacitate me. So I didn't know how he would react, and it was wonderful to hear. He spoke so well about what I intended to do, which was to try to shorten the war at that time, and by telling the truth, that I asked him, he'd been a supporter of the war at the beginning, as I had. I went to Vietnam. And I asked him what had changed his mind, because I hadn't talked to him. And he said, your letters from Vietnam had made me realize that we shouldn't be there, that we should be out and so forth. So I said, well, you're a father who's learned from his son. And he said, yes.
And that warmed your heart.
And I can say that's very gratifying to a son to hear. And now that I'm a father, I know how gratifying it is to, and it will be to Ed, to know that I think you've learned yourself from.
Absolutely.
But how is it today to live, I mean, in the U.S.?
Well,
do people...
It's painful for someone as patriotic as I am, and as I know Ed was. It would be painful. It's painful for him, I'm sure, from afar to watch what's happening to his country, and that's why he risked his life to try to change it, to help it. Likewise for me, in some degrees, where I'm living through a part of my own life that I hoped never to experience again. I think we're slipping into war in Iraq in much the same way we did into Vietnam. And this is, half a century later. And telling the same kinds of deceptions, and the media being just as vulnerable to being deceived by the president. I was the first person ever prosecuted for a leak in the country, in America. There were two after me before President Obama. I live in a country now under President Obama, who I supported twice in 2 elections, who has prosecuted 9 people for whistleblowing, for leaking, 3 times as many as all previous presidents put together. So if you ask me how I feel about that, it's terrible. And I can only hope, I'm very happy that Ed was not deterred and intimidated by that record, which he could see.
But the question
in
is...
being a whistleblower himself, and I hope that his example will encourage others.
What do you think it takes to get, a recognition that what he did was for the best?
I think there's a good way to frame this, that the government, it's not part of the government lexicon that they want used. Daniel Ellsberg, what ultimately he did was he told the truth. He shared the truth with the public. Now think about this. Edward Snowden, many years later, told the truth, shared the truth. No one can dispute it. And so many people in between, whether it's William Binney, Diane Rourke, Tom Drake, many others, who have not only been prosecuted but persecuted for telling the truth. I really like to frame it that way, is they've told the truth. They've shared the truth of government abuses, overreach, I believe criminality. They've shared that with the public and also with greater humanity of significant programs. Yet the government, think about this, they've told the truth and they're being prosecuted for telling the truth. How are we raised as children, whether it's in Sweden, whether it's in the United Kingdom, the United States, or virtually every culture, where are we taught that we will be prosecuted for speaking the truth? We're told to be honest. not dishonest. So, this award means much to me because I think that's the recognition. People are recognizing it's a sense of vindication that he's spoken the truth. Would we be better as a people if we were ignorant and we didn't know that truth? That's what our government tells us. They say, oh my goodness, we're not safe because we've been told the truth. That is absurd.
But do you think he can return to live a life like you do, for instance?
I'm sorry to say this in front of his father, and it will not be news to him, I think. My own judgment will be the law will not change in such a way that I can foresee as to give Edward Snowden a fair trial. He cannot come back to this country, to the United States, and get a fair trial. Under the Espionage Act, he would not be allowed to argue his reasons, his motives, whether there was harm or benefit. I think, by the way, he has a lot more support than he did a year ago because when he revealed this, because a year ago people would say, or would hear the government say, there's blood on his hands, terrible harm will come from these revelations. Well, a year has passed,
but
and people have noticed they haven't been able to identify any specific harm that has come.
What do you hope for?
I tend to agree with Dan. Time, as I've mentioned before, we can't predict the future. I'm thankful that he has safe haven in Russia. I'm thankful to the Russian people. And as a father, if he remains in Russia for the rest of his life, I'm thankful for that. I'm comfortable with that. The Russian people were very gracious when I was there, and I expect to be there many more times. But time tends to cure all ills. And I do believe that there's much more truth to come forward. There's much within the public domain that still needs to be investigated. I can't predict the future. I would not recommend to my son that he return to the United States tomorrow if he was pardoned, if all of the charges were dropped. Not tomorrow, because there are too many people within the defense industry, the Homeland Security industry, who have much to lose when you have someone like Edward Snowden and many others who can come forth and tell the truth. They threaten the incredible profits that those corporations enjoy. They profit from war. Again, we're slowly sliding into a war
but
in
still,
Iraq.
it's a young man sitting there waiting for what?
He's not sitting and waiting.
No?
Ed Snowden is living.
Okay.
Ed Snowden is continuing to speak his truths, working with people like Daniel Ellsberg.
Outside the United States, he's able to be interviewed, as he is frequently. I'm on a board, the Freedom of the Press Foundation. We just had a meeting last week where he participated via Skype, or actually Google Hangout for 3.5 hours. He wouldn't be able to do that in the United States.
So he's following his path still.
I'm sorry?
He's following his path, I mean his road,
Well,
doing
he's able
what
to educate the public as he's helped his father and me and others. I was able to do that when I was on trial because I was out on bail. He would not be out on bail. He would not. So he's where he needs to be. Now, Russia.
What about Sweden? Do you think Sweden should give him
Yes. He would prefer, I believe, I haven't asked him specifically, there's a lot of places he would prefer to be in Russia. I'm sure he, as you say, he is grateful that he has the asylum in Russia, which is one of the few countries that at this point feels independent of the United States and able to offer him asylum. He's applied to 22 other countries, I believe, in Europe, and he would, I think, prefer, it wasn't his intention to be in Russia, he would prefer to be in others, including Sweden and Germany or others. Many people would welcome him there where the public would welcome him, but the government would be afraid of irritating the President of the United States, and nobody wants to do that except at the moment Russia.
Tomorrow you will receive the prize for the prize that your son gained, and I will just congratulate you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jag gjorde alltså intervjun igår strax innan Lonnie Snowden skulle ta emot sin son Edward Snowdens pris. Det var alltså Right Livelihood-priset 2014.